Hey everybody, welcome back. Today I'm going to talk to you about Michael Sandel's article on genetic engineering. It's called The Case Against Perfection. Okay. I hope this video will be a little bit shorter than the previous one. There was quite a bit to go over in the last article, and this one not quite as much, I think. All right, so let me give you an outline of the Sandel article. One thing we want to talk about is autonomy. I want to tell you about the 4 examples he uses. I want to skip some stuff. Athletics is not as important to us. We're going to skip this. We're not going to talk about baseball and Pete Rose and Michael Jordan. In a different class, I would. I've written a paper on doping, the use of steroids and so on in sports. I think athletics is a fascinating topic, like ethical issues in athletics. But for our purposes, we're going to skip it because I want to talk about genetic engineering. So what we are going to talk about is parenting. And we're going to talk about, let's see, 3 problems. Okay, so that's what I want to talk about today with Michael Sandel. Okay, so Michael Sandel is at Harvard University. He's very famous, very charismatic professor. The article that I asked you to read is not an academic journal article. It appears in The Atlantic, which is kind of a popular magazine, which is designed to be read by just anyone with a basic high school education. So it's not like a journal that's specifically geared towards academics. Okay, and the first thing I want to talk about is autonomy. And what Sandel is on about here, so this article from The Atlantic is basically the main points that he makes in a book that's on the same topic, The Case Against Perfection. So he says, what's wrong with, this is the subtitle. The subtitle of the article is What's Wrong with Designer Children, Bionic Athletes, and Genetic Engineering. Okay, so designer children, like if we could eventually, this would be genetic engineering. If we could genetically engineer our kids to be exactly the way we want them to be, have the right hair color, the right eye color, the right height, the right skin color, the right intelligence, the right, what if I want my kid to be great at piano and, ballet or whatever, right? Okay. Bionic athletes, we design athletes to be even stronger and faster than they are already, and just in general genetic engineering. Okay? Well, here's one possible answer. A designer child would no longer be fully free because it would be pointed towards particular choices. Example, if I design my child to be a chess master, then he would be pointed that way. And that would be bad. Okay, that if I design my kid to be a chess master and I push him to play chess and wouldn't it be bad for him if he doesn't get to live a free life where he gets to make his own decisions about how to live his life? Instead, he's got this domineering dad who wants him to be a chess master, okay? And we all know, probably if not among your own friends, there are famous people who we know their parents pushed them really hard. So Tiger Woods, his dad pushed him really hard. Michael Jackson, his dad pushed them really hard. Apparently, some of the siblings of Michael Jackson said his dad would beat them when they were kids if they didn't get the dance steps just right. Mozart was the same way. His dad really, really pushed him. All right, so autonomy. We want kids to have kind of an open future, an open life. We don't want to force them to do things. This is one potential reason we might think it's bad to have designer children, bionic athletes, and genetic engineering in general. Okay, I call this, though, one possible answer because this is important. Sandel, MS, Michael Sandel rejects this. Okay, so he does not endorse this autonomy-based reason for not having designer kids, not having bionic athletes, just not engaging in genetic engineering. Okay? He says, first of all, because kids don't get to choose their genes anyway. And two, he says, we still feel uneasy when people choose enhancements for themselves rather than for their kids. Okay? Maybe I can even emphasize, italicize themselves, okay, rather than for their kids. So he says, if I were to choose to make myself better at chess through genetic engineering, a lot of people would just look at me and say, oh, Eric, that's not a good thing, that, you know, what you just did. And we would feel the same kind of unease as when I manipulate the genes of my kid to make him better at chess, okay? So it's not the fact that it's some other person I'm manipulating. It's kind of something inherently bad about the manipulation itself, all right? Okay, let's talk about 4 examples. Okay, these are all examples, Sandel says, of technologies that maybe not even can, initially are used for good, but can be perverted. Maybe I don't want to use the word perverted, but can be twisted, I'll say, to be used for something dubious or bad. Okay? So, one example is what he calls muscles. Muscles, okay? So we have developed therapies for muscular dystrophy and atrophy in old age, but we could use that to improve athletic performance. Steroids, in fact, are basically something that's developed, you know, that can help with muscular atrophy in old age. You can give those guys steroids, you know, testosterone. So, but we could, to improve muscle tone and, you know, bone density for people who are older, okay? We could use that to improve athletic performance. So one thing that's good, therapy, and one thing that's bad, like enhancing athletic performance with steroids, okay? Next example, memory. We have therapies for dementia, which could be used to enhance normal memories. Someone who just has a regular memory could maybe, right now we don't have this kind of therapy for dementia, but if we did, maybe we could twist its use and give it to people with normal memory. Okay? Something he doesn't mention, but Eric mentions, okay, is drugs for ADHD, to help you focus. So I don't know if you're aware of this. This is maybe more prevalent at a really competitive place like Harvard or something. But there are drugs for ADHD that can help you focus, that help these kids who have a hard time focusing to focus better. But you don't have to have ADHD in order to benefit from that drug. And so it turns out there's something of a black market for these ADHD drugs to help students when they're studying for finals or whatever, to really help them focus and study harder. Does that seem fair to you? Like, it seems potentially unfair that some students might have access to these drugs to help them study when they're just normally, you know, average students, when these drugs were developed for something completely different, for ADHD. Okay, so memory. Height. Growth hormone can be given for kids who are really far down on the growth chart. Okay, kids who are like below the 5th percentile on the growth chart can be given growth hormones. They get, you know, taller, faster, and get closer to normal. But, of course, it could also be given to, say, basketball players who are already pretty tall, just to make them slightly taller so that they're better at basketball, superior, and have kind of just an ever so much of an edge over other players. Okay, so height. Last example, let me make this slide a little bit bigger so you can see the font, the size of it. Okay, last example is sex selection. So we have technology like ultrasound, you know, I'll put it this way. obstetric ultrasound to look for, diseases and other weird things, other abnormalities in utero. They can also look for sex. And then I may have mentioned this before in this class, I'm not quite sure, but in China, they forbid ultrasound technicians from telling the sex to prospective parents. And of course, the reason they forbid that, it's forbidden by law. Like the law says they can be punished if they tell prospective parents the sex of their fetus, because some parents want boys and they will abort any girl. If they discover it's a girl, they'll abort it. Okay, and they don't want to do that. So, but the point is, if you have this technology of obstetric ultrasound and so on to look for diseases in utero, you can also look for sex. And then once you know it, you could abort the sex that you don't want. And maybe that's bad too, okay? So again, all these are all 4 examples of technologies that are developed with kind of good intentions and they can be used well, but they can also be twisted and used for things that are potentially bad. All right, good. All right, I'm gonna skip the talk about athletics. I'm gonna move straight to talking about parenting. Okay, so what is wrong with making designer children? Okay, so the idea is I want my kid to be a certain way, maybe a certain hair color, a certain eye color, a certain height, to have certain special talents, like maybe chess or something. What's wrong with designing my kid to do that? All right, so again, MS, Michael Sandel, it's not autonomy. It's not that the kid should be free to live, his own life how he chooses. Rather, the problem is, he thinks, we should appreciate our kids as gifts. Okay? We should accept them as they come. This is basically a quote. Let me give you the quote marks here. Accept them as they come, not as objects of our design or products of our will or instruments of our ambition. Like if I want to have a kid who's like the most famous pop star in the world or the best golf player in the world or something. Parental love is not contingent on the talents and attributes a child happens to have. Okay, so this quote sounds a little bit like Elizabeth Anderson. It's in the same spirit of her article that we read on paid surrogacy and why she thinks paid surrogacy is wrong. All right, so he thinks we should appreciate our kids as gifts. So another way I can think about, you might want to think about this is, let me expand this a little bit too. Eric's example. So, as you know, like my wife, maybe by the time you listen to this, my wife will have given birth, but at the time I'm recording, and I'm trying to record all these things early so that I don't have to do it after the kid is born. At the time I'm recording this, my wife hasn't given birth yet, and we get asked a lot, like, oh, what do you want, a boy or a girl? And, the PC, the politically correct answer is, oh, we don't care as long as it's healthy, right? But the point I want to make here is, almost every parent I've ever come across, or any prospective parent I've ever come across, says, like, we'll be happy no matter what it is. Okay, prospective parents are thrilled no matter what the sex of their fetus is. Okay, my wife wasn't like this. She actually kind of cried when she found out it was going to be a boy. She wanted a girl that badly, but that's not the PC thing to do. So yeah, the PC thing to do is say, oh, we're happy no matter what, as long as it's healthy, right? But that idea that you're thrilled no matter what fits in with what Sandel is saying, that we should accept this kid however it comes out, girl or boy, tall or short, whatever we get, we should be thrilled to get it, okay? Because it's a gift in that way. In contrast, if I buy a new phone or laptop, something like that, I will, discriminate, not maybe discriminate is the wrong word, I will be very picky about the features I want versus the ones I don't care about. Okay? I might want a new phone that has a certain screen size, or I might want a laptop that has a certain operating system, or I might want this feature or that feature, and I'll be really, really picky about it, and that's totally fine. Okay? But Sandel's point is, babies aren't like that. Kids are not like things where we just pick out what we want, the traits that we want, and we're disappointed if we don't get those. No, kids are gifts in the sense that we should just appreciate no matter what we get, we should appreciate them. Okay? That's his main point. All right. Okay, here's an objection to that view. Objection. Okay, the objection goes like this. It says, wait, Sandel, parents already mold their kids in lots of other ways. Okay? Like expensive schools, tutors, tennis lessons, camp, piano, piano lessons, ballet, swimming, all these things that we can do for our kids, right? So if I wanted to have the chess master, I would drill him with chess problems all day long and send him to chess camp and give him puzzles to solve every day and so on. If that's what I really wanted, I could mold my kid to do that. And in fact, that has happened. There's the story, I forget this person's name, but there was a story of a dad who I think had 3 daughters, and he just decided that he was going to make his daughters into chess champions. He thought chess was an area where his daughters could excel, and apparently he also thought something like the competition among women in chess was less competition among women in chess was less fierce than among men. He happened to have daughters, so he said, okay, I'm just going to drill my daughters until they become chess champions, and it worked. They did become chess champions. Okay, so what about this? We already mold our kids in lots of other ways. This suggests that we are not just kind of accepting them of whatever they are. We're trying to push them to be certain things that we parents want them to be. Okay, here's what Sandel says. These are similar in spirit, but it just shows that there's a problem with too much of all this other stuff too. Okay? So he even says, as an example, he says when Michael Sandel was a teenager in the 60s, I'm guessing, or maybe even earlier, I'm not quite sure exactly how old he is, but it might be, roughly then. When he was growing up in high school, when MS was growing up, was a kid, okay, recreational drugs were for so-called checking out, like basically pot. Marijuana. Oh, I don't know how to spell marijuana. I think that's how you spell marijuana. Okay? Well, for checking out. But today, kids take drugs to help them focus, like for their ADHD, right? I think there's a little bit of a selection effect, to be honest. So Michael Sandel, again, he teaches at Harvard. Harvard, I'm sure, is incredibly competitive. These kids are like the most competitive kids in the country, if not on the planet. Okay, so the kids he sees, yeah, they may be taking like Ritalin and so on to focus, and kids maybe at other schools or who are not even in college may be taking pot to check out. Okay, but he says, look, there's this generational change. In his time, you just wanted to relax and check out. But today, kids are just so focused on succeeding and getting ahead and being better than everyone else and going to all the camps and having, all these experiences so they can go to the best colleges and so on. Okay, very different, he says. All right. So that, I think, he says is the main problem. But then he says, so this is his response to the objection that parents already mold their kids in lots of other ways. He basically says, yeah, and those things, if taken to extreme, are also wrong. Okay? All right. So now he wants to finally talk about 3 problems. 3 problems with genetic engineering and the quest for designer babies, the quest for perfection. All right? He says the quest for perfection would change the moral landscape, he says, in 3 ways. Okay? Humility, responsibility, and solidarity. So I'll talk about each of these in turn. All right. So humility. Okay. He says, we should be open, humble, about getting and embracing any kid. You know, whatever we happen to get. So this is kind of the point again about being happy if it's a girl, happy if it's a boy. Whatever our kid, whatever your kid is like, you should be happy to have that unique kid, rather than saying, oh man, I'm so disappointed that he wasn't this, he wasn't a she, or he didn't have this feature, or she didn't have that feature. Okay? So kind of forcing ourselves to embrace and love whatever kid we get kind of makes us humble. It makes us think like, hey, it doesn't have to be this way or that way. All right? Okay. Another point, he says, is about responsibility. Responsibility. Okay? He says, with lots of control, we also have lots of responsibility. It's kind of like that Spider-Man quote, you know, with great power comes great responsibility, I think. But this one is about control instead of power. All right, I guess they're similar, control and power. Okay, one way he puts this is today, if the player misses a rebound, the basketball player misses a rebound, the coach may blame him for being out of position. Tomorrow, he'll blame him for being too short. Okay? The idea is, hey, if it is up to us, if we are able to change our height, then the coach will say, hey, now you should have changed your height. All right? The fact that you are able to do this means that you are now responsible for not choosing to do this. And I think we've talked about this before when we talked about, what was that? Actually, let me pause and think about if we've talked about this before. Yes, okay, so I remember now. I think we've talked about this before when we talked about, see, Emmanuel on euthanasia and the right to die. Emmanuel, remember, says, if euthanasia and physician assistance in dying are legal, then it is your responsibility to choose it or not. And it shouldn't have to be your responsibility, your burden to make that choice, okay? Just like it shouldn't have to be, the basketball player shouldn't be blamed for saying, hey, I don't want growth hormone. I want to be my regular natural height, okay? If growth hormone is everywhere, then we could blame him for not taking it. And that's why, like, you know, he's not as good as he could be. All right, same stuff. And remember also, like I think when we talked about Emmanuel, I talked about different examples that are similar to this, like wanting no co-ed dorms or wanting everyone to wear uniforms in school. These were the two examples that I'm pretty sure I talked about last time when we talked about Emmanuel and euthanasia and the right to die. All right, because if there are co-ed dorms, it is now my responsibility to choose not to live in them, and I can be labeled a prude. If there are no more uniforms in school, then I am now responsible for continuing to wear my uniform, and I can be labeled, you know, uncool or unfashionable or poor or whatever it is. Okay. All right. Same point here. Okay. Last point. Solidarity. Okay. So here Sandel says, think about how health insurance works. Okay. No one knows our own individual risk of getting diseases. So we pool all our risk together and pay for everyone's health insurance. Basically, the healthy people pay more to help the sickly. Okay, the sickly get more out of a health insurance, a pooling program, than the healthy would. The healthy pay in more than they get out of it, and the sickly get more out of it than they put into it. All right? But, okay, so that's the situation. Healthy people pay more to help the sickly who get more out of it. Okay? If healthy people know they're healthy, they might leave. Okay, leaving only the sickly in the pool for health insurance, okay? And then the premiums would go up. Everything would get more expensive as healthy people move out. And as it gets more expensive, even more people would move out. People who are slightly less healthy than the original ones who left, the second most healthy people will leave. And then the third most healthy people will leave. And then the fourth most. So it's this kind of race to the bottom where eventually only the sickliest people are left in the pool. Okay? So solidarity means basically, okay, don't allow that. Basically require everyone to stay in for the good of the group. Okay, don't allow the healthy people to leave, to opt out of the pool. Okay? So, in general, Sandel says, in general, the super successful people, you know, maybe like him, Harvard professor and all that, owe things to the kind of less successful because it's just a matter of luck that they had, you know, more success. It could be luck in their genetics. It could be luck in their environment. It could be luck that, you know, their parents stayed together. It could be luck that they didn't get breast cancer when they were 20 years old and have to quit college. It could be all kinds of different things of luck. So the idea is, if we allowed people to become way, way better, stronger, faster, smarter than everyone else, they will opt out of these kind of solidarity agreements that keep us all together, bind us together. Okay, so that's it. So one of the main points that I wanted to get across for this section was about these three problems with the quest for perfection, and also the problem with you know, parenting, that we need to accept our kids as gifts. Okay, and that's it. So I'll see you next week. Thanks.